Hello, and welcome back to the Triangle Business Podcast. I'm one of your co-stars, Joey Natale, followed by.
I'm your other co-star, Scott Moore.
Welcome back to the show. Today, we're going to be talking about company culture, how relevant it is, what is it, how does it show up, why is it important, why does it matter, why might it matter less than you think in some ways. So,
Ooh,
yes, sometimes it does,
interesting.
sometimes it doesn't. We'll explore and see what comes up today. So let's go ahead and kick it off with this question. And what exactly is company culture, and how is it different from employee morale, benefits, or simply liking your coworkers? What comes up for you, Scott, on that one?
I think of company culture is a um well, what like what's it like there? Like
Mhm.
that, it's as simple as that.
Yeah.
And my opinion is every company has a culture. It's either happening on purpose
Hmm.
or it's happening by accident, but every company has a culture.
I would agree. Absolutely.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, what do you think? Is that the definition that we're going to agree to for the purposes of the podcast,
I
or
mean, it
do you
makes
have any
sense. I
else?
mean, I could look it up, but like, I think we're going to riff on it for a minute before we do that. But to me, I think it's interesting about the idea, without looking it up, what the difference between morale, employee morale, and company culture is. Because I feel like in a lot of ways they're very intertwined. And so, like, what immediately comes up is like, I'm going to pick on tax professionals because I know when it comes to tax season, it can be a very stressful, urgent time period for them. And I don't know a whole lot about business. So, those of you who are listening, who are tax professionals, like, I'm making up some stories here.
Listen, we get a lot of referrals from tax professionals. Let's don't piss off the tax professionals, but
Of
also let's
course.
talk. Let's
Yes.
totally talk about
Of course. So, I'm thinking like uh, one analogy that comes to mind is like the rapids of corporate America. And sometimes it's like the rapids are very tough. Sometimes it's like smooth sailing. And I think a tax professional, that one kind of comes to mind where like tax season is very rough. It can be for some certain individuals and sometimes not. So the morale might be not so great at that time. Like this really sucks, but this is more of a sprint, and then we can rest. And I think as I'm saying this out loud, what's evolving is like the culture of the company is kind of what it's like all the time, or for the most part. Like this is a company culture where you can go talk to your boss. There's an actual open door policy. It's not crap. It's actual real. Your coworkers like to, collaborate with each other versus like they kind of stick in their own, do their own thing. I think what comes to mind is if there is a not great company culture, it will exacerbate the company morale and make it not great on long periods of time. But yeah, that's what came to mind for me on that one. Kind of the
Yeah.
distinction between those two.
What's interesting, I've noticed over the years, and I find that this applies, well, the rule applies to small business, which is what
Mm-hmm.
we're here to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
It feels more easy to identify in corporate America.
Mm. Yes.
Um, and that is it's it's worse to have a stated company culture that is clearly not followed by
Yes.
leadership.
Yes.
Oh, and that has propagated down all through the
Of
culture.
course. Yeah.
It's worse than having no stated culture and everybody's just making up whatever they think the culture is there.
Yeah.
Like you know the saying, like, people don't quit bad jobs, they quit bad bosses.
Absolutely.
I think that the reason why we believe that to be true, or maybe frequently true,
Hmm.
is because um in companies that don't have a stated culture, the culture you experience is mostly whatever your boss does.
Yes. Yeah.
Like how your boss treats you is the culture. Um, if I mean, the other thing I experience a lot from talking to people, in the career coaching stuff I've done and other just people I know, um, is they think company culture is bullshit.
Yes.
And the reason that they think it's bullshit is because there's no mechanism by which you try to match what we say we're going to do with what we actually do.
Hmm.
And so I can't I can't do anything about what the company culture is at Apple, or I can't do anything about what the company culture is at, Amazon.
Hmm.
Um, the clients I coach, I ask all of them, what is your company culture?
Hmm.
And it's funny, like ask a solopreneur that.
Yeah.
And they're like, it's just me. And I'm like, yeah. And do you treat yourself in alignment with the company culture?
Oh.
And do you treat your clients in alignment with the company culture while it's just you?
Hmm.
Because if like it's a great time to start and discover how do you operate day to day.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, I think of the company culture at Scott Moore Coaching is actually the same as my contract.
Hmm.
A lot of people listening to this aren't going to know what that is, but in transformational leadership trainings, you have a thing called a contract, and it's how you define yourself.
Hmm.
I have my contract in three different places around my office, but like one is right here, and it says, "I am an authentic, connected, loving leader." And so my I decided that the culture here at Scott Moore Coaching ought to support who I strive to be. And so it's authentic, connected, and loving. And um, if you ever see me, Joey, if I ever treat you in a way that feels not authentic, connected, and loving, you should challenge me
Hmm.
on that and say, uh, are you I'm not experiencing you as you being authentic, connected, and loving right now. And, you know, that doesn't mean that's the right culture for a company to have, but having a mechanism whereby somebody is allowed to say to a boss, a leader, an owner, like, I'm not experiencing you in alignment with the culture you say we're
Hmm.
supposed to have here. That's a like that's a pretty important piece of feedback.
Yeah. I would say
But a lot of, if you don't have a stated culture, there's no way for anybody to keep you accountable to it.
that's also true. Yeah. That makes sense. I like that because that was something we were talking about, which is like, when is it time? One of the questions I had, which you already started to answer, which is when does a small business need to start thinking seriously about culture with the first employee, fifth, or so on? And I like your answer, how you said with yourself as a solopreneur. And that's really true. Like I definitely agree with that. Where like, how are you treating yourself? This is kind of what I speak about to a lot of my clients of just like, are you being kind to yourself? Because this mountain that you're climbing of finding a job, this mountain you're climbing of growing your business, scaling your business, or starting your business, it's a big mountain and it can't be overcome in a day. So, like, how are you filling your cup up? Somebody smart once said, you know, your full time job isn't finding a job, your part time job is finding a job. And the other part time job is taking care of yourself. And I agree with that. It's a really smart person. And and so I think that is definitely something to take away here on that moment. But, and also, I should say, another question that comes to mind is the company culture created by what the leader says or by what leadership repeatedly does? I feel like Solopreneurs does, but let's say it's already a little bigger than that. Small business, a team.
Well, I mean, like to me, the answer has to be both. Again, if you don't verbalize, it's not about verbalize, it's about communicate, right?
Mhm.
Like you ever walk into a business that has like maybe a reception area, and like
Yes.
behind the reception area there's like a mission statement on the wall?
Yes.
So a mission statement is not the same as a culture,
No.
but usually you can glean a lot about what the culture is from the mission statement.
Right.
Like I always think like go you, like put it out there, because if it's out there it allows people to have a touchstone for like what is my experience supposed to be like here.
Hmm.
And um well, I'm going to pick something really silly, but like this makes me feel old. Like back in the day, Burger King had this thing where it's like your Whopper your way,
Oh yeah, I remember that.
right?
Oh yeah.
And so that what they were establishing there is we will will accommodate your preference.
Yeah.
And although we are mass producing hamburgers, we're willing to make it the way you want it made.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't be weird if the person at the counter said, "Can you not put any pickles on it? No pickles, please." Right? That wouldn't be weird. That would be normal because they've established that you should walk away thinking, "I got my Whopper my way."
Yeah.
And so the idea of putting communicating what your culture is meant to be um, gives you at least the possibility of following it. But while it's not stated, there's nothing, there's no standard to which to adhere.
Mm.
Um, and you know, like this isn't the first question out of my mouth with every single business, but like usually in the first couple of meetings, I will ask them like, what's the company culture? And if they're like, well, it's kind of like this, I'm like, is it written down anywhere? Do the employees know that that's what the culture is meant to be?
Yes.
And you know, if not, like, great, we have a little project to work on.
Mm.
But like I said before, you know, ask people who work in corporate, like, what's the company culture? Most of the time, I get a, well, they say that they're like this,
Yes.
but nobody acts that way, and it's bullshit.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that because when the company gets large enough, there's actually subcultures. So like department
I
based,
believe that. Yeah.
which is very interesting. So like when I was at Lenovo, the company itself has its own culture, but then I was in a department, which is like it was completely different. And it like rubbed against some of the values and also aligned with them. My experience was it rubbed against the best parts and then was aligned with the worst parts. So I thought that was very interesting. Um, but another question that comes to mind, here's this is a fun one I like, is a small business, in a small business, is the company culture really just the founder's personality magnified?
My answer to that is if you don't do anything else, then yeah.
Huh. Yeah.
Like if you don't have a different, but also let me be really clear about something, right?
Yeah.
Authentic, connected, and loving, that's not my personality. Like,
Yeah.
well, what I
It's
mean
parts of
is
it, but
on a good day,
yeah.
yeah, because that's the contract. Like I
Yeah.
declared that I will strive to be these ways. It's not because it's easy.
Yeah.
It's because like I aspire to show up in the world in those ways. The like absent a stated culture, yes, of course it's going to be a magnification or an exaggeration of what the owner's personality is.
Yeah.
But like if you're the kind of person that like flies off the handle and yells at people regularly, I would humbly suggest maybe that's not what the culture ought to strive for. Um, Also, if you're the kind of person that um, is really reluctant to ever criticize anybody, that can be a problem too.
Hmm.
Like having a culture where feedback is given from a place of love is like, that would be a place I'd want to work. I don't want to work in a place where they never tell me the things I'm doing wrong.
Yes.
I also don't want to work in a place where when I do something wrong, the first response is to yell at me.
Yes.
Um, but like the example I know best of this is when I had my first business where I was a videographer.
Hmm.
I mean, it never crossed my mind that I ought to have a company culture as, in my videography business. But unknowingly, I adopted the culture from the company that was referring me most of my business.
Mm.
And for those that don't know, the I was a videographer and I only did deposition videos. So
Hmm.
for civil court cases. And one of the things that I adopted, the business that was referring me business was almost exclusively run by women.
Hmm.
And they were all very smart and capable, but they were also they sort of held themselves as subservient to their clients who were all lawyers, and the large majority of them were male, right?
Hmm.
And it was this like, whatever you say goes. I'm not here to question anything.
Interesting.
And it like that got me in trouble because I just was like, they would set the room up, and there was a couple of times where I'm like, hey, I should have said the lighting in here is not good, and
Mm.
this is not going to look good. But I didn't say anything because the culture that I had unwittingly established was just keep your head down.
Mm.
And the other culture I established unwittingly was a culture where I thought I was the least important person in the room, and I didn't command respect from the people who were my clients. So they treated me like shit most of the time.
Ooh,
So, like, that's the consequences of not proactively establishing some kind of culture.
interesting.
Um, and it happens all the time in small business because you're so busy trying to do all the other things that it requires to get a business off the ground
Yeah.
that you don't, take the time to be like, well, no, this is important too.
Yeah.
Uh,
Interesting. It makes me think about
I mean, when
pro.
you started your coaching business, did you have in mind a a culture like it
Oh
was,
no. Not
grow
even
your light,
grow our light.
grow our light, right?
Just
I
grow your
mean,
light was taken already.
well, I mean, but interestingly, like grow our light, that tells me a lot,
Yes.
right?
I put a lot of thought into that one.
Yeah.
And I liked it because I didn't spend I frankly didn't spend too much time on the name, but I'll relate it to the company culture where like I wanted something that had growth. I like light over dark, if you will, and then our like a team. I was gonna do your because it'd be your light, but I was like, no, our is pretty good.
Yeah.
I've actually liked it because now I can just call it goal for short. I've never used that, but like it's very fitting in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, like there was kind of, I imbued some authentic, like I took the leadership training too for the audience, and mine is trusting authentic present leader, which I think aligns with the name of the business and the company colors. I have blue, green, and yellow, and those are all bright and happy and calming colors and things like that. So I think there is an element. Now that I think about it out loud, I'm like, I guess I was kind of cultivating culture, not realizing it.
Do you find it's easy for you to be trusting, authentic, and present?
On most days, yes. Um, yeah, something I work at, I think for sure. And I think authentic would probably be the easiest for, well, it depends. I don't know. On a bad day, not so much. Hard to say. But like most of the time, yeah, I strive for about 80%. I feel pretty good about that. And yeah, so that's
Yeah.
where I'm at on that for sure. Something else that comes to mind on this is we were talking before the episode started about I've been working with some clients and those one in particular about how we'll just say increasing your emotional intelligence and how that can be relevant because people
Okay.
who are just all business in a lot of ways and just very good at that and making, quick decisions. And, you know, oh, it's not personal, not business. It's just business question, which I hate. I hate that so much personally. But I'll leave that rant another time. But like they are making really good decisions, but also like I wonder how much that contributes to company culture long term, or even really in the short term. Of like, I'll say it this way, that might be more relevant to the conversation. So there's this concept, I think I've shared this before in other episodes, where there's warmth versus competence. And it's kind of like on this kind of scale. This comes from Vanessa Van Edwar's work, essentially.
Yeah.
And quote her because I'm using her exact terms. And if you're more warm, like people trust you, you're more friendly, you'll get more dates, you'll get more interviews, you usually get more promotions. Um, but if you're too warm, they won't take you very seriously. This is arguably something that I've struggled with.
Okay.
Being too warm, if you will, too uh, maybe playful, might people might perceive me as, or people perceive this as. Vice versa, if you're too competent. No, this isn't competence on skill level, but this is how you show up and how you're being. If you're too competent, everybody knows you're the boss. Everybody knows you're in charge, and they listen to you, but they don't trust you, and they might be afraid of you. So
Okay.
marrying the two, we call that charisma. Essentially, it's learning how to kind of balance both. But
Sure.
having too much competence as a leader, I think in company culture, like it might breed more fear. And I make up the story that you might lose people a lot of ways. Like somebody who's having an off day and they can't express it, they got to keep it bottled in. Thinking about kind of our grandparents' generation of just like feelings, shove that down, get back to work.
Right.
We don't have time for that. It was business right
Yeah.
now. I'm
Well,
thinking that's kind of extreme example, but yeah.
I it's interesting you say like um I put a lot of emphasis on competence. Like I admire people I perceive as competent. And also I completely get what you're saying about like if that's not tempered at all with something else, then is the competence like either a I can't trust anybody else, so I'll just do it myself? Or is it, yes, I have a huge amount of competence and I hold everybody to a very high standard that doesn't leave any room for grace.
Well, interesting point. Now, those are kind of similar adjacent concepts. So in this
Okay.
framework I was showing, it's more like how you show up. This has a lot to do with body language. Kind of
Mhm.
more, just to give you an extreme example of like, if I were to be too warm, like, oh, hi, how's it going? Oh my God, it's so good to see you. Like, hello, like very warm, very engaging. Too warm, you're like, that person's fake
Mhm.
sometimes versus confidence is like, greetings. Welcome to your office. I'll show you where you're going to work. I'll be
Yeah.
expecting the TPS reports by Monday. Very like not
Okay.
always stone faced, but like I'm being really extreme here, but like you can't get a read on them. You don't know. Do they like me? Do they hate me? Like
Mm.
they could be loud. It's like, hello, it's nice to meet you. And they're very like booming sometimes, but like they're authoritative in a lot of ways. So like having high expectations and standards, like that's different. That's if you can't articulate that, like I think of someone who's too warm, that this goes into a conversation about agreeable versus disagreeableness, actually. So agreeableness is like a doormat, and disagreeable is like you're an asshole. And this
Yeah.
is kind of in a framework I made up myself, where like if you're too agreeable, you might be like, "Oh, can you get those TPS reports for me by Monday?" Like if you can, it's totally fine, even though you know it's not fine.
Well, I mean, so in listening to that, I'm also thinking about how that translates into culture.
Yes.
Like that kind of squishy sort of warmth of, if it's late, don't worry about it, we understand, you're new here. Or if it's late, don't worry about it, things happen, life is more important, or whatever. That could lead to a like a kind of a really slack company culture where nobody cares about deadlines and things being on time don't matter.
Right.
um it, but also another like not so awesome culture would be one where it's like everybody here should know their job backwards and forwards. Mistakes are a thing that other companies make, not us.
Ooh.
Like, like you be on time, whatever it takes. It doesn't matter if you spent all weekend working on it. Like, I don't want to work there either.
No.
Um,
Yeah.
so like taking the time to conceive of, possibly workshop, and then communicate what your culture is gives you an opportunity at least to strive for that. And then when things go wrong, and they inevitably will, like a great thing to always look at is, okay, hold on, like let's look at that, the after action report of that, what happened. Did we follow our culture? Right, first of all, because
Mhm.
if the answer is no, then I'll be like, okay, then this should be a wake up call for us to follow our culture and see if that prevents these kinds of things from happening.
Mhm.
If we followed our culture and the thing happened anyway, like it might reveal the gap. Like our culture does not address client satisfaction. Like I've worked with companies where their culture was very inwardly focused.
Mhm.
It was all about how they treat their employees. And I want it to be a nice place for employees to work. So that's important. But if you don't apply that to the customer, there could be a gap there where it's like that's not being addressed. And yes, like we're very big on giving people grace, but also what about when it's late and the customer's like, where's the thing?
Yes.
Why didn't I get my product or service?
Yeah.
It's like, well, we were giving grace to our employee. Like, okay, that could also be something that the customer is on board with, but was it communicated to the customer? So, yeah, I
The-
mean, I think of culture and word of mouth as being similar to each other, where people are like, oh, my marketing is mostly word of mouth. I'm like, cool, that's not a plan. That's just the thing that will inevitably happen. And culture, that is not communicated is not a plan. It's
Mhm.
just the thing that will inevitably happen
Mhm.
somehow, some way that may or may not align with how you want things to be. So
Yeah.
at least by writing it down and communicating it, you have a shot uh, at having it happen, and then be able to point. It's like, look, we did the thing.
I agree. And I think what comes up for me is like someone who's more, I don't want to also make a distinction here. You can be warm and disagreeable, and you can be agreeable and competent. In fact, having those two things helps you kind of merge more of the charisma piece. Because like I can be very playful, but then very direct, be like, I need this. Get it
Yeah,
to me because I believe in you. Then I'm very warm about how I said it, but I'm very direct, like you need this because it's gonna be results versus being like a hard ass about it, which is a thing to strive for as well. But I think also what's interesting is like, if you want to be sure there's a body language piece, but there's also a piece of like, if you are more competent and you tend to be more of, if you get the feedback in your life where people is like, you're just so cold and removed and you like don't tend to dive deep, like there's some probably emotional intelligence training, like learning to develop empathy, which is a skill that one might need to develop because if you can't, or more importantly, you don't want to empathize, which I think is probably more important than like you can't because you just haven't been trained or unaware of it yet. That I believe will negatively impact your culture, especially if you're the leader. Because like if somebody is just like, my mom died today, and I can't work. I'm like, that sucks. Did you get me the reports yet? Like, that's just insensitive, but that's an example of how it could go.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
if you're going to have other people working for you,
Yes.
asking yourself, like, how do I treat these people when they have an emergency?
Yes.
And also maybe even talking about it in advance. Like, these kinds of things constitute emergencies. If they
Right.
happen, like, I expect literally nothing from you. I remember years ago, one of my favorite bosses that I ever worked for, um, he was my boss when my daughter was born.
Okay.
And without getting into a huge story about it, like, she wasn't like born way early, but we reached a point where, because of my ex-wife's increasingly high blood pressure, they're like, you need to go ahead and have this baby today for health reasons. So
Mhm.
let's do that.
Oh.
And so it was like we thought we were going to have about another week or so, and suddenly it was go time.
Oh.
And um, uh, it's funny we're talking about it because her birthday is in a few weeks and she'll be 25. Um, uh, and So I called my boss and I'm like, I'm at the hospital, uh, and we're having a baby sometime in the next 24 hours, and I won't be in for work. And he goes, I wouldn't expect you to be. Like, you should be gone for a minimum of a week. And I didn't even I knew that this was happening, so I don't even know why you're on the phone with me right now. But, you know, go have your kid,
Yeah.
right? And I was like, wow, what now, did that company have a written culture? Nope. Did it suffer from all of the vagaries of not having a written culture? Absolutely it did.
Hmm.
But part of the unspoken part of the culture was he had kids of his own. He was a few years ahead in life of the rest of us while we were all having kids. And he was like, of course you're busy right now. Like, I would not expect to hear from you. We're handling it,
Hmm.
you know. And if a client called and he's like, or he I'd like to think what he did was he called the clients and said, the appraiser who was working on your file just went into the hospital to deliver their kid, uh, ahead of schedule. We're going to be late, and I'm letting you know. And I'm willing to kind of help you navigate that as best I can, but we think it's important that our employees having a kid. So, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
right? And like, that's what I mean by managing it not just internally but externally.
Hmm.
And I'm just going to I keep repeating myself, but like, if it's written down somewhere and it's communicated to the employees and it's communicated to the client would be like, we know that, family is one of your cultural values.
Hmm.
So of course it makes sense that our financial report is going to be late because of a family issue.
Yes.
Uh, so,
That makes perfect
and
sense.
yeah,
That leads me to another
yeah,
question
go
on this
for it.
topic actually is should a business hire for culture fit, or does that risk hiring people who all think and act the same?
I I don't think I don't think I've ever in, encountered a group of more than three people where everybody thought and acted the same, and three might be stretching it, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't telling people during an interview process, our company culture here is this. Like, do I think that you're only going to attract people who are like that? No. What I've coached a lot of people who are interviewing for jobs. They're going to say, "Yes, I fit that culture. I'm a good fit to work at your company."
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to tell you whatever you want to hear, probably, but at least you told them something. And then later on, if you're like, you know, our culture is A, B, and C. And then you're like, my experience of you is you're not being very B and C right now.
Hmm.
At least you've established what it is. I don't think that you risk having some kind of weird echo chamber by telling people what the company culture is.
That's true.
You're giving most of us, it's like, we already talked about the contract, right? Am I naturally authentic, connected, and loving? Like, sometimes, on a good day, but I got to strive for that shit. So I'm setting myself a bar to aim for. And that's the same way company culture is just like create a standard to which we strive. And if we're excellent, but not perfect, that's fine.
I
If
agree.
we're good and we're not great, that may be also fine. If
I
we are
agree.
like way off the culture,
Mm.
we should use that as a guidepost to get back.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. Anyway, sorry, I just feel like I'm ranting at this point,
No,
but
oh, well said. No, that's why we're here, too, Scott. This is a
I
platform
I
for
just
that
don't want it to
exact
turn
thing.
I don't want our podcast to be called, Joey asks really smart questions and Scott rants for a while. Um, or
It's
maybe
fine.
that's our after dark podcast. That's our drunk podcast
Yeah,
is
we could definitely do an episode drinking. That'd be
nonstop
hilarious.
ranting.
Oh man, that'd probably be a good time to do a special episode.
My friend Sarah, and her business partner, a few years back, they had a podcast and they were only ever drinking. Like they drank every time, and I'm like, yeah,
That's
that's not
fun.
really the context for us, but
No, that's
but but it was fun to listen to sometimes.
I
So
bet. Yeah, I bet that's hilarious though.
that was part of their culture.
Yes.
Their culture is we're here to talk about stuff
Interesting.
as roller derby gals, and we're not going to be sober while we do it.
Oh my gosh,
Uh,
that's funny. Um, okay, well,
I
I
mean,
think
what?
it's a good time.
So let me ask this question, Joey. Like,
Sure,
you encounter a new client,
sure.
okay? How early in the conversation do you think it's important to be talking about their company culture?
Well, what comes to mind is when I'm talking to them, I'm gonna get a sense of who they are pretty
Yep.
quickly. And I've never directly asked them what their company culture is like, but I might start and see what that even means to them moving forward. But what I have asked is like, what is your standards of excellence, and have you explain that to your
Yep.
people? And like, what does your standards of excellence look like? What does it sound like? Like, what does it feel like? And do they know that? Uh, Current client right now, he hired a new employee, and he was just like, "What should I do?" Like, what's your 90-day plan? Where should they be in 90 days? Like
Yep.
reasonably. And if you expect them to be full running in 90 days, like, did they know that when they took the job? I don't think
Right.
that's a really realistic expectation because most people take about 6 months to kind of get a wrangle on something. That's kind of when the honeymoon phase ends. It's kind of when you've kind of seen a lot of the things. It can take longer, it can take shorter, it depends. But that's been my experience. Um,
I
but
usually think that just on that, like, I think that in 6 months they'll be at 80%,
yeah, I think that's
and in 3 months they should be at 80% of 80%.
what 80% of 80%.
Yeah, like if that's where we want them to be in 6 months, that
Oh, okay.
having them be most of the way there in three
Okay.
months.
Okay, cool.
Um,
Yeah, I think that's a better way to put it. Like, I agree. Gives much more, a little more wiggle room there. But like that was kind of what I was gunning for. What I've been kind of asking people, and it tells them like, essentially, it tells me like, how well do you communicate? Do you communicate? Do you have regular meetings with people? Are you an absentee boss who goes and gets, a pack of cigarettes and milk and never shows up with your employees again? And they're wondering like, I only see you once a year for the Christmas holiday party, aka your yearly review.
you're
Kind
not
of
my real
kind of
dad.
yeah, like not a great boss or, just tried to be as a father figure at all or friendship or romantic partner in any way, shape, or
Right,
form. Or are you the kind of like, hovering helicopter mom? Just like,
right,
how's it going? What you doing? I noticed you did this wrong. You could do this better. I'm like, ooh, easy up there in a lot of ways. So like that kind of tells me like how are you a leader also, which indirectly, but now I connected the dots in this moment. Like that's kind of the culture that they can develop and reinforce, and that'll either
I mean,
keep
I think
talent
where
or
are you on the spectrum of management? right? Like micromanaging to the point of annoyance
Yeah.
at one end and like absentee boss on the other end.
Yeah. Are you catching them doing only things wrong? Or are you catching them doing it right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what's your percentage? Like, I would hope you eventually move to the point where you catch them doing things right and reinforcing them things because nobody wants to hear only negative reinforcement. That
Yeah.
was one of my bosses at Lenovo, and they
It's
only talk to me
interesting.
when there's a problem.
This conversation has been really useful to me because it actually makes me think I should be asking the question earlier than I do.
Yeah.
We talked about this before we got on the podcast
Sure.
today about how I'm assessing the person. And I do think that that's most important to me. Like I need to be learning how I'm going to relate to and support the the human being that
Mhm.
is my client
Mm.
and not just their business as an abstract entity. However, early in that conversation, I probably should be asking, what's the company culture there at, XYZ Incorporated? Because if they're like, it's this, then I could be like, do you show up those ways? How often do you show up those ways? If they don't have an answer to it, then saying, well, if I said I give you $1 million to name three things that uh, describe the culture there, what would it be? I think that could be a really informative part of the early stages, either during a sales call or session one or whatever,
Yeah.
to get a handle on that because it matters so much
It does.
what the culture is, and oftentimes we just treat it like, well, at our company retreat, we decided this was the culture, and then we carved it on a plaque, and we don't think about that anymore.
Yeah.
So
It's that really cool time we watched Tom carve it into the stone, and we were like, "Good job, Tom!" And then we
yeah,
never did anything with it again, which happens a lot at company retreats. I've helped facilitate those things and like, oh, this is a really awesome plan. Everybody's excited. Everybody really wants
right.
to do this, and then they don't stick with it,
Yeah.
which is unfortunate. And so, yeah, I agree. So like that's kind of my answer where I kind of I guess I didn't really know I was asking about company culture indirectly, but like I was getting a sense of it. Is like,
Yeah.
how do you move through the world? How does it affect others? How do they affect you? And like, do you ask your employees for feedback? How's that go? How's that two-way street? Are you just giving them feedback only?
Yeah.
Right. And then it goes into like, how do you give them feedback? Do you only give them criticism? Like I said, are you catching doing things right? Like, are you giving them, we're not talking about feedback sandwich here. We're talking about like, I like what you said, like hearable praise. Like you give them a really hearable praise about their work. And like, that's probably a teaching moment that sometimes it goes into like, how do you give hearable praise? And like, how do you do that in the workplace and how impactful that can be in more ways than they probably ever realized versus like, thanks for doing those TPS reports. I really liked to use the certain font that you did. It really was very fun. Like,
Yeah.
cool. Like, you know what I
If the
mean?
font on your TPS reports is the thing you're getting hearable praise about, you
Like,
live in an interesting world.
like I would consider that to be not hearable praise, but like, like, those kind of things is what comes
Yeah.
up for sure. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Well, to me, there's not a lot of things that are more important than culture. Uh, Like, does culture pay the bills? Uh, like, I'm going to say, if you don't have strong business fundamentals, then you can't culture your way out of bad business structure, not in the long run.
Yes.
And but at the same time, if you don't pay any attention to culture, I suspect you're going to have a lot of client attrition. You're
Hmm.
probably going to have a lot of employee attrition,
Yes.
and you're going to spend more time trying to iron out hurt feelings on a regular basis. So,
Yeah. I,
um,
we may have just answered it, but I'm gonna ask a question anyway to make it more poignant. It's like, can you have a company have a successful business model but an unhealthy culture. How long can that last?
Well, what do you mean by successful?
Yeah, I guess that's a good definition to decide on. Is like I'm gonna go. My interpretation of what that word means, or what comes to mind, is like most people think, is the business making money and is it growing?
Yeah. I
I think
mean,
that's a very common misconception of what people think success is. We've talked about that. That's not exactly, probably a whole nother podcast is like, what is a successful business? But we could do that as another episode
well,
entirely.
I'm gonna I'm really struggling about whether sounds super judgy, but I'm gonna choose to not care.
Okay.
Um, is Amazon a successful business?
One would argue, yes.
Do you want to work there?
Oh, no, I don't. Absolutely not.
Do, do you know anybody who works for Amazon or who has worked for Amazon?
I did very briefly, not well, but yes, I've met a few people.
I mean,
I've met some people who work in the Magnificent Seven for that. And those of you who don't know, that's Google, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and some other ones I'm blanking.
yeah.
And Nvidia right now.
Well, like I'm just talking about Amazon for a
Sure,
second,
sure, sure, sure.
but like I don't know what the company culture is at Amazon.
Yeah.
What I know it like there was a guy I knew who was kind of like the friend of some friends, and I used to see him at social gatherings.
Yeah.
And I wasn't like, how are things over at Amazon? I didn't have to ask that question because every single time we got together, he was complaining about how he was treated at work.
Was he in
And
like the offer, like manager offers
I
position, or
think
like
he
the
worked in
delivery
IT,
driver? Oh, okay. Yeah.
right? And it was it was not great. It did not paint a picture of a place I would want to work. Now again,
Yeah.
I'm I'm not a corporate worker anyway. I never
No.
have been. But it did not leave me thinking like, oh, they have a healthy culture over there. But are they successful? I mean, I would argue they could be more successful if they had a culture that produced better PR, that produced a, a lighter impact on the planet, that produced happier employees.
Mhm.
Like, you know, is it worth it? I don't know. I mean, they have a lot more resources to throw at answering that question than I do.
Right.
But I would look, nobody we're coaching is Amazon.
No. Yeah.
And so I'm just going to maintain the same thing I've always maintained about small business is that like it's a fishbowl. It's a tiny, tiny fishbowl. And so not having good culture going for you is just like taking a fishbowl and filling it with crappy water and putting fish in it and being like, hopefully they'll make it. No, you want to set up conditions to be as favorable as possible because it's a small space and you're going to be up against whatever the content is all the time. So,
Yeah.
um,
And
yeah.
an answer that comes to mind for me about that question is like, I'm going we'll use medium to small business as an example. 'Cause I think that's more fluctuates than a large business. Um, how long can you have an unhealthy culture? Well, large like
3 to
enterprise.
5 business minutes.
Yeah, whatever that means. I'd say for large companies, it really depends. Like, because my experience of a lot of larger companies, and this is not true for everybody, but like it's kind of moderate to not great, unless you're on a certain team, and certain people might be doing well. But small business, I think, or even medium-sized business, I would say is like it won't last. I don't know how many years, honestly, or how long, but I know that people will start to leave eventually. Like you said, people leave bosses. not the job itself. But also, like in this context, I say they leave the culture and the boss because it's not just the boss, it's also all of their coworkers and
Yeah.
maybe unrealistic expectations associated with that. Like, I have a client right now works at one of the Magnificent Seven companies. It's either Google, Apple, and they're like, due to some things, they are now working basically two jobs
Yeah.
with the same amount of pay, and but now working like 12-hour shifts, which is unsustainable. But that's the culture there. So you work for this company, which is kind of the tagline. Again, that's a large
Yeah.
enterprise business where they can just have so much money they can just be like, it doesn't. Well, this kind of goes into one of our previous episodes of like one of the most expensive things you can do in a small business is hire somebody because you lose time and you have to train them, things like that, at least for the short period of time.
Right.
Right. But a large company, like, yes, it's still expensive to hire them, but like, it's like kind of a drop in the bucket compared to like all the other things they're dealing with. So it's not as big of a problem. And so they don't really need to care as much of like how healthy the culture. I think what also comes to mind is what we learned from leadership training. Like there is a percentage tipping point of, and I don't know exactly what that is in business, but I know in the leadership training, it's like 2%, something
2%.
ridiculous. Arguably, that could be in business, although I'm making those numbers up. I would be curious to dig more into that and come back with that information. But like, there's probably a percentage of how unhealthy the culture is across all departments that will inevitably
Right.
run the business to the ground. And that's a sinking ship for sure. And so that just happens a lot faster with small businesses and it's much more obvious. And I make it this.
Well, I think in the interest of kind of wrapping this up a little bit,
Sure.
what here's how I think of that, right? Businesses have Small businesses have a lot of failure modes. Like we know this is true because most small businesses don't make it.
Right.
And so like there's a lot of things that could go wrong. Culture is one of them.
Right.
So why wouldn't you try to have one and have a good one
Mhm.
so that at least you're attempting to mitigate that failure mode? Like we may go down because the economy or because of our sales process or because the person that was our primary production person had a health crisis or whatever. Like we could go down for a lot of reasons.
Mhm.
Let's don't have it be because we never bothered to name a culture and strive to create that.
Yeah. I mean, that what comes to mind is to a certain extent, culture is more in your control than some things.
Yeah.
Like the economy isn't really in your control. And, sales processes to a certain degree, but like you can make some major, what little hinges swing big doors. So you can make some little minor tweaks that have major impacts in your culture. So, like one tweak that comes to mind when I did facilitation for a company was I had one rule, and I said, you can only, if you would like to give feedback, you're welcome to do so, but you have to start the statement is my experiences,
Mhm.
and you weren't allowed to share it if it was not your experience. Either you heard it, felt it, or saw it. And that made sure we didn't have like knockout, drag out fights.
Yep.
And it worked really well. So like that's an example, even in like a meeting culture, you can do things.
Yep.
That's my little tidbit, my little tip if
I
you want
like
to
it.
shift your culture there. Any other bit of wisdom you like to leave our audience with today?
Um, if you don't, if you can't currently articulate your company's culture, and I guess if you're hearing this and you're an employee, ask your boss, what is our culture here? Um, if you can't articulate it, it means it either doesn't exist or it's not being communicated.
Yes.
And that would be a good thing to change.
Yes.
And it isn't like it's usually not expensive
No.
to do that.
No.
Like it could be as simple as, you know, somebody gets out a crayon and writes it on the printer paper and sticks it to the wall. And like, that's our culture right there.
Yeah.
Um,
And if your boss doesn't know, ask their boss. If they don't know, if you can, find someone who does. If your
yeah.
boss doesn't know and their boss doesn't know, like, that's
I
should
want
have
to point
started
out a
your concern.
really quick example, and it's a little bit on my mind because the World Cup is has been going on.
Right. Yeah.
Um, uh, in Ted Lasso, what's the culture?
I don't know. I haven't seen it. So,
Oh, you haven't seen it? Oh
no, I
man,
haven't seen it. Yeah. It's on
dude,
the
you're in for
list.
a treat. Um, uh, Believe.
Oh, okay.
Like he has a sign, it's on a yellow piece of cardboard. I've seen a lot of people emulate this. There's one in my office right there. It says believe.
Mm,
And I think that's a really worthy cult piece of cult. Like if you don't believe something, like you either think it's bullshit or you don't think it's possible or whatever,
right.
it's not going to happen, right? So that like his whole culture he was trying to establish in the show was for start, believe.
Yes.
And if you're not capable of getting there, this may not be the place for you. So anyway, I just like it occurred to me suddenly, like this doesn't have to be complicated. And he
No.
literally wrote it in marker on a piece of poster board and stuck it on the wall of the locker room. And it's one of the iconic things in the show.
Yeah.
So
Well
uh,
said. Well,
fun topic,
fun topic.
important stuff. Ask
Yes.
yourself, have I created and articulated my company culture? Has it been
E-
communicated?
Even
So
if you're a solopreneur. Well, this has been
maybe
fun. And
especially.
especially for those of you listening, thank you. If you enjoyed this episode, give us a like, give us a follow, subscribe, give us a comments, tell you what you think, tell you what you didn't like, tell you what you want to hear more of. If you want to be a guest, reach out. We'd love to have you and highlight your small business. And tune in next time. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.